This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogmen, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good? I'm doing great. And it's what can I say? It's an interesting day in the neighborhood. Nothing, sometimes, no, wait, I take that back. There's times, that saying, be careful what you wish for. Like, sometimes interesting is a two-edged sword. Sometimes it's better to just take a back seat, and normal and ordinary is great. Believe it or not, it's underrated. To some people it's boring, but there's a middle ground between, and I've used this quote before from Louis L'Amour, which is adventure is a romantic name for trouble. And sometimes when nothing's happening, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So again, I'm looking at it from, I'm fine with, normal ebb and flow day after day. Because sometimes, it helps you prepare for when, things come out of left field. And like I said, nothing unusual with my animals, because they're like kids, every once in a while when you think everything is fine, they do something or not do something. So everything is fine. And yes, I do have my enforcer here just to keep the troops, And I know, again, I'm going to reiterate, I am going to do the show for Halloween, and because like I've done it every year, I know people are asking me, and everybody says, well, believe it or not, Halloween will be around here pretty soon. People don't realize time flies when you're having fun, and even when you're not. But yeah, I'm going to do, like I did the Mardi Gras one. And I'm also going, and I've had people also ask me about, are you going to do the whatchamacallit, the how can I say it? Because I've done the other links to hypnosis and things like that, and I am planning to, I've promised and I haven't delivered. How's that? That people wanted me, I was supposed to do it for the New Year's resolution, and I didn't do it, and I am going to do it. Just how's this? I get to be too much of a perfectionist, and I want to do something, but if it's not the right thing, it's like I talk myself out of it. So, but I am going to come through and do it. How's that? I promise. I promise. But anyway, guys, let's get on to the good part. And the good part is, who is the guest tonight? This is the first time this gentleman has been here on Stories of the Supernatural. His name is Paul Blake Smith. Okay. And, most of the time, I usually talk to I give like a, whatchamacallit, like what do you call it? An intro about a person, but sometimes I find that I decided this time I'm going to let the guest introduce themselves. So if you would be so kind, could you do that? Go ahead and tell us about yourself, Paul.
I'm from Cape Girardeau, Missouri, originally. That was my hometown. And we had, as I discovered many years after my birth, I won't tell you when that was, but my birthday was yesterday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you. That in 1941, when my grandfather was a judge in Cape Girardeau and my dad was a little boy, we had, apparently, I believe it's true, an extraterrestrial spaceship crash in a farm field just outside of town. And as I began to hear the story more and more, I wanted to read a book about this. So I kept waiting and waiting, and a little paragraph would appear in a UFO book here and there. And I thought, well, I'm tired of waiting. I'll research the darn thing myself. And I did, and it turned out pretty well. That was my first and second book. Recently, my publisher died.
Oh boy.
And yeah, his son took over the business and folded it. So you can't get those books right now. But I have a new improved book on the Cape Girardeau UFO crash of 1941, and I hope to get that out later this year with a new publisher. So in
Okay.
reviewing all of that, I found a couple of really fascinating stories that also have never been in book form. And one of them is the great Miami UFO story we're going to talk about tonight. It's like
Yes.
perfect for your show. I'm glad you had
Yes.
me on.
Yes.
It
Yes.
involves the president of the United States, maybe the most famous entertainer in the world, who lived in Miami, and
Yes.
what they did one night in February of 1973.
Right. And a lot of people that haven't been alive that long. But yes, and I know that that comedian is Jackie Gleason, right?
Right. Ralph Cramden of the Honeymooners.
Yes,
And
that's what everybody knows him.
yeah, and even
Or
on the
from Smokey and
Honeymooners,
the Bandit,
yeah, well,
the
that's true,
sheriff.
yeah. And when he filmed the sequels to those, by the way, he made sure they were all filmed in Miami so he could just get up out of his own bed. And he
Yes.
lived in Lauderhill, a subdivision of Miami, in a gated community called Inverary, where he used to host his own golf tournament back in the
Yeah, he
1970s.
was big time into the golfing thing.
Yes,
Yes.
he golfed constantly. That's why he moved to Miami from New York City in 1964. He had what he called a UFO house, this circular house that he had custom built with telescopes and a Tesla coil and ham radios for trying to contact spaceships, because Jackie Gleason in private was just nuts about the subject. He wanted to make alien contact. He lived for stories of UFOs and aliens and would
He
call
was
up.
ahead of his time in a way.
Yeah, he sure was. And he risked his career doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Should anyone hear this kind of stuff, because they might have thought he'd gone a little loopy. But most people didn't talk about these subjects. They weren't mainstream in the 50s.
No.
Jackie
No,
didn't
people.
care. Yeah.
Well, people
He,
don't realize it because nowadays it's like very common or mainstream. But back then you'd get that look like, what?
Yeah, space cadet. They called you a nut
Yeah.
or a kook. But
Yes.
Jackie had fame and fortune on his side. So people would talk to him, and he would call up UFO book authors, and the subject of their books, like UFO experiencers and people who cite these things, and ask them every sort of detailed question. And he just wanted that information badly. He offered at one point $50,000 to anyone that can show me proof, hard proof of extraterrestrial visitation. That did not get answered, so he upped it to 100,000, and a few years later, 500,000. And by the early 70s, he upped it to $1 million. $1 million for anyone who could show him the hard proof of a spaceship or an aliens or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was a drop in the bucket for old Jackie, who made up to $14 million per year, custom
Yes.
built house and the finest cars. He spent quite lavishly. He felt it was worth it if he got what he wanted. So he was quite serious. And I think the president of the United States, Richard Nixon, in early 1973, needed some hush money for his Watergate burglars and their attorneys. And I think he took Jackie up on that offer. And decided to show.
Hey, you know what? I never thought it was that.
Yeah, well, Nixon was in big trouble privately. His Watergate burglars were threatening to talk to the media, to congressional investigators, the FBI. Nixon wanted them to keep quiet, don't talk about this break-in that happened on his watch, and Nixon may have known about it. So he wanted some hush money. And on the
You know
Watergate,
what?
yeah,
God, that is incredible. I had
yeah.
never thought of that angle, you know
And
that?
so Jackie spent freely. He was a Nixon supporter. They shared the same attorney, a man named Herb Kalmbach, who went to jail for distributing large bundles of cash to the Watergate burglars to keep their mouths shut. So we can really put two and two together and come up with an incentive for Jackie and Nixon. Why would Nixon go for this? Because he needed the money badly.
You know what? My God, I had never looked at it from, I mean, I had heard, you know, you hear rumors back then, like you said, it was not mainstream, but you'll hear whispers, especially when you lived in South Florida, that this took place or that Jackie Gleason, he had this interest in the UFOs, but it was kind of like, almost you want to think it was a Miami thing that people in Miami knew about, but I never thought of that angle right there, but it makes sense.
Otherwise, why would Nixon risk national security to
Yeah,
show a
yes, with an
civilian?
entertainer, right?
Yeah, Jackie Gleason had no military, no government, no intelligence backgrounds whatsoever. He was a friend of J. Edgar Hoover, considered an FBI informant privately. I've seen the documents. And also, he was a Freemason. He was well connected with people in government. And he was good friends with Jerry Ford, the next president, who was also a Freemason. And they shared exciting secrets. So, this was the motive for Mr. Nixon to say, all right, he's probably sick of Jackie bringing this up. Jackie was so obsessed with UFOs and aliens and
Do
everything.
you, let me ask you, do you think that, how's this? I'm trying to think of this. Do you, did Jackie Gleason's interest did he ever see anything? Is that why he was so interested in it? Or was this just somebody that whispered in his ear, hey, these things are real?
He had heard so many stories and was so
Okay.
obsessed that he did give an interview in the 1950s to TV Guide magazine and said, I've
Mm-hmm.
never seen one. And by the early 70s, he did give another interview and said, I've seen some, and in the
Okay.
Miami area. So there's another little clue that might tell us what he saw. So
Okay.
Jackie was living in Lauderhill and hosting his own golf tournament in February of 1973 on a Monday. Rather odd. Jackie wanted the biggest prize money, the best celebrities, Joe DiMaggio and New York Yankee greats, baseball players. You'll remember well the '73 Miami Dolphins Super Bowl champ,
Yes.
Coach
Yes, it just so
Shula,
happened.
yeah, Larry
The
Hizarka.
coach's son attended my school, and I
Oh,
remember getting
oh,
to school on
there.
Monday, and it was swarmed with the press. And everybody was like, huh? You know, because when you're in school, you know, you really don't follow. But yeah, that I do
Yeah.
remember that. Yeah.
Jackie invited them over, and they were all part. Well, not everyone, but all the stars like Zonka and Kick and Coach Shula
Yes.
and other Dolphins were part of his golf tournament, which was televised on CBS. The special guest on Monday, February 19th, was Richard Nixon, Jackie's buddy, who sat down in a helicopter on a special chopper pad on the golf course. And they got out and they got into, Jackie greeted him. They got into a golf cart and they went buzzing over to the press, put up some
Mm-hmm.
microphones and held a press conference. And so it made the papers the next day, Jackie and Nixon buddying up together for this celebrity invitational pro-am golf course. And so there's the hard proof. And when I went back to Mr. Nixon's presidential records, yes, it's in there that he visited Jackie that afternoon. It's what the two of them are alleged to have done that night. And what do you know? There's a page removed from the Nixon presidential records about 8:30, and you don't find out what Nixon was doing for the rest of the night. The key time in question. Obviously, they didn't want this found out, so they
So
pulled that out.
like that itinerary stuff that they keep track of all of a sudden.
Right.
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah, it's no shock, but Nixon's chopper pilot knew how to get to Jackie's house by landing on this chopper pad on the golf course where Jackie lived on the 18th green. Would have been a short walk for Jackie or a golf cart ride to go right over there at night around 9 o'clock when a chopper set down and to be taken directly to Homestead Air Force Base about 30
Yes.
miles south of Miami. That's where Nixon went in and out all the time. He visited South Florida 55 times during his presidency, which was, of course, cut short because of his resignation. 55
Let me tell
times.
you something. I remember, well, later on, even though the Homestead Air Force Base did remain there, back then
Gotcha.
it was basically, it was a very important base because it was
Yeah,
right there at the southern end of Florida.
yeah.
And there was always rumors that a lot of things were flying in and out
Yes,
of
that's what
Homestead
I
Air
found
Force
out and put in
Base.
my book, yeah, and that, before, Nixon, it was Kennedy who had a place in Palm Beach, and we used Homestead Air Force Base,
Mhm.
and so
Yes.
Nixon, had a home in San Clemente, California, and it's customary for presidents to just stay with wealthy friends and pay them back, when he went on vacation, but for some reason, as soon as he became president, Nixon bought a little beachfront home. It was just a little cinder block house. It wasn't fancy in Key Biscayne. And he would take a
Mhm.
chopper from Homestead to Key Biscayne and a little chopper pad set right outside his home. It was so handy for him. So he
Right.
went down the coast from DC to Homestead Air Force Base 55 times. And so
What?
you kind of want,
55
yeah,
times?
in his presidency, like, why are you down here so often
Yes, God,
unless
that is a
something
lot.
big is going on, and he wants to
Yes.
keep tabs on it. So Jackie may have caught wind of that, but one night Jackie said, on the day of the golf tournament, he got a phone call and he went taking off into the night. And his wife said he came back around midnight and he was pale, ashen. She said he was haggard looking, like, what happened to you?
Who
And
who came back? Jackie Gleason came
right,
back?
Jackie came back that night and he was shook up real bad and he slumped into an armchair in the living room and she said, where
Uh-huh.
have you been? And he had to come up with an answer, so he blurted out the truth. He says, I've just been to an Air Force base with the president and he showed me what I've been wanting to see at last. And she said, what? And he said, that's alien bodies. The president of the United States showed me alien bodies at Homestead Air Force Base. And she's probably like, oh, come on, where have you been really? And so he had to explain that Nixon was his guide, his escort for this inspection tour, that
Mhm.
likely Jackie just was flown there in a helicopter, flown right back when they were finished. It only took like maybe 2 hours for the whole thing to come together. Nixon probably took his chopper from Key Biscayne and met him there and showed him the hard proof at last, what Jackie's been craving for his whole life, just a few days before his birthday, which was a few days ago, the
Mhm.
anniversary of his birth.
Right.
So it really shook him up bad, is what his wife said. Like he wasn't play acting. He was pale as a ghost, she said.
You know what? I guess what I'm thinking of, that saying that they say, "Be careful what you wish for,"
Yeah,
because
you
when you
just
get
might
it.
get it.
Do you think it was that what shook him up? And I know there's no way really to know, but was it just a confirmation that there was some type of extraterrestrial life, or was it the nature? In other words, he was already a believer, but he saw
Right.
something.
That's a
The
good
nature
point.
of it was
Yeah.
like, this is not what I thought.
Yeah.
Either the only thing I can think of that somebody would come back like what you described is that there was some type of possibility of a threat to humanity. You know, in other words, this wasn't going to be like that movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, or in other words,
Well,
that maybe he saw something that was this could go so wrong.
he told his wife what he saw, dead bodies of alien
Okay.
creatures, corpses. But as you say just now, you kind of wonder if Jackie saw more than that and
Yeah.
didn't tell his wife everything, to have himself braced up emotionally to see this all his life and then see them. What
Mhm.
else did he see that he didn't tell his wife? Her name was Beverly. She waited about a year and she was split from Jackie. And she had given an interview with a tabloid and said, Jackie told me this crazy story, and I think he was telling the truth. It's wild. He said he saw these 4 dead bodies of these small alien creatures with big bug eyes and pointy ears. And they were only like 2.5 feet tall, dwarfish looking.
And
And
this
it
was
was
how long after? So, do you think maybe he held back, maybe because his marriage was maybe already in trouble, and he just said,
possibly, yeah, he
"I'm
could
just
have.
gonna give you the cliff
Yeah.
notes on this," but
Yeah. It's that's what he at least claimed to her, and she may
mhm.
have left out some of the story, or he may have left out some of the story. But if you've ever heard of the 1955 Hopkinsville, Kentucky
Yes, I have.
UFO landing and the little aliens that attacked the
Yes.
Sutton family, the
Mm-hmm.
description matches perfectly with the little pointy ears, and they were dwarfish and creepy
Yes.
looking. So
Yeah,
I'm
that they
thinking,
called them like goblins. Yeah, like
yeah, and
goblins.
so that's kind of just exactly really what Jackie described to his wife. And when she told this to a tabloid in 1974, a year later, Jackie read it and he blew his top. He picked up the phone and called her and said, you're never to talk about this. This never happened. I never said anything about it. So people, including the media, bombarded Jackie with interview requests and said, please tell us about this alien thing. He says, I have no comment. I refuse to comment. He didn't say it's a bunch of nonsense. Don't believe her. She's making it up. He never said that ever his whole life. And so he just said, I don't want to talk about it. And so they split up permanently, got a divorce. And in
Mm-hmm.
1983, she wrote her own one-page article for the National Enquirer and said it all over again and pulled out a few more details that he was so upset. When he came home, he would thunder with anger against the government for hiding the truth from the American public. That he was really angry, that he saw the proof. They've got the bodies, he said, and they won't tell us, they won't show this to us. And then he said, she said that his mood swings would change and then he'd just get giddy with excitement. He was all on a natural high that night and in the weeks to come. That
Mm-hmm.
she said that he was all excited because he was shown the hard proof above all American citizens. He got the hard proof at last. He got his money's worth, apparently. He saw the bodies. I don't know if he was allowed to touch them. And there's one rumor, can't
Mm-hmm.
confirm it, that says that Jackie was then taken from this secret lab, a laboratory on a secluded part of Homestead Air Force Base, and taken nearby to a hangar where there was a silver disc, a craft,
Wow.
and supposedly it was up in the air and it was like activated and it was being held down by cables, and that Jackie got an eyeful of that, and that was also part of what just left him bulldozed.
And you know what this, and you tell me if you've come across this either directly or indirectly, where I've heard that talking about if you were even the president down, disclosing about the UFOs and extraterrestrials, like that there were agencies that this was, you could not do that.
Yeah,
Basically,
I'm sure. Yeah, it's
this was like,
interesting to,
no, no, you
yeah,
can't.
it's interesting to note that as of February of 73, J. Edgar Hoover was dead, Allen Dulles at the CIA was dead,
Mm-hmm.
LBJ and Harry Truman, the only living presidents, both of them passed away in the past month and a half before the big reveal to Jackie. So Nixon was
Oh.
king of the hill. He could do anything he wanted. He just won re-election the previous November in a record landslide. They called him King Richard, the imperial president, because he always seemed to do whatever he wanted anyway. So he had to have felt like, who's going to stop me from
Well, but you
revealing
always heard that it was like I don't want to say even whether it was military or one of the maybe.
NSA or something
And
that
as
tried
some,
to stop?
even maybe some that we don't even know, that
Yeah.
this was like, even if the president, you're not allowed to disclose upon
Yeah.
this for whatever reason, whether, and they, of course, it would cite national security, but this thing of letting where the public, like what Jackie Gleason was saying, like they should tell the American people that this is happening. It was like, no, like, and from what I understand, along the years, certain people met their demise because they were getting too close to
Yes. Kind of scary
information.
stories there. Jackie said that he was sworn to secrecy by Nixon before they left
Mhm.
the airbase and he was flown home. So that's a believable part. And yet
Sure.
he broke that oath right as soon as he got home because his wife thought, probably, have you been out drinking? Have you been out with a mistress? Where the heck
Yeah.
have you been? And she was alarmed by his appearance and his giddy mood swings. He'd be angry, he'd be excited, then he had
But you
trouble
know what?
eating
Maybe
and
he even
such.
thought, I don't want to die with a secret. I might.
Yeah, that's true. If you can't tell your wife that you're married to,
Well, it's almost one of those things like, I wish I could tell you more, but I'm bursting, so I'll tell you a little bit,
yeah.
but then I'm not really going to tell you the other part, the one that I wonder if there had any that were alive.
I raised that question in my
Mhm.
book. the
Mm-hmm.
Nixon-Gleason alien encounter. And I don't have a hard, fact for that, but I lay out the possibility that, according to a government document that was leaked in 2017, the document was written in January of 1989, and it said, uh, this is a whopper, this is a big one. Human alien diplomatic exchanges were going on secretly in the early 1970s. That's Nixon's time. Was that what was really going on at Homestead, where aliens were landing, sending out friendly pilots and astronauts and scientists across the base, and we would send our own representatives, maybe intelligence agents, to go into the ship, take off, go for a little ride, and come back, and then they filed their report. Diplomatic exchanges, isn't that a very exciting thing that you could have witnessed if you were Jackie? And that would also have just blown you away.
I'm just, no, yes, that's like an understatement because you always think of, I don't know, you would think that somebody who's all excited about seeing something and when they see it, it's like they're not going to be wigged out. They're wigged out, but not the way you're talking about,
Yeah,
which leads me to believe he must have seen something, for lack of a
right.
better word, disturbing.
Yeah, hopefully not. And he came back in one piece. And it's funny that he did not act hardly at all, barely on TV for years, and
Mm-hmm.
hardly at all in the movies for like 3 or 4 years until Smokey and the Bandit came along,
Right.
and he took that part. So he was really shook up. He didn't really want to work. He had trouble eating, sleeping. Jackie was notorious for drinking, so that wasn't
Right.
probably a big change. And he chain smoked a lot, and
Yes,
this
right.
caught up to
That's
him in the late or the mid 1980s. He had cancer and all kinds of health problems, heart disease and such, and he died in 1987 without giving a firm interview. He refused to comment when confronted on the story for the rest of his life. Again, he could have said this is a bunch of silly business. It never happened. Now, there was an article online that came out just as my book came out and said
mm-hmm.
that Jackie had told some show business friends that he is assured we are being visited. And they said, "Oh, how do you know?" And all he would reply is, "Nixon showed me the proof." And that's all he wanted to say privately. He would admit, "Nixon showed me the proof." Publicly, he wouldn't admit anything at all. So there's more confirmation that Jackie really was taken on this excellent adventure, which I now have in movie screenplay form, and we'll see if my agent can land that with a movie company. Such it's
Okay.
such a terrific story, and we'll
Yes, it
see if
is.
it bears up.
Because it's like in that deal, let me tell you something. That $1 million deal, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Where and you know
and
what? And Jackie maybe told him, "Hey, I want $1 million worth of whatever it is I want to see. Better be worth $1 million." And he got it, I guess.
$1 million gets our attention today. Like we'd like to have that, but it was worth a way
Oh,
lot more back then. It was a
yes,
huge
yeah,
amount. And Nixon could have done a million things with his $1 million, paid these people, gone off and bought a yacht or something, and
yeah.
bought some more lawyers or something, and
Well, maybe, and also I'm thinking he probably trusted Jackie Gleason enough to know when I show you this, I know that you're going to keep this to yourself.
yeah, he trusted him,
He
which
trusted
was
him, right?
a
It's
bit of
not
a
like
mistake right
it's
off the
like, yeah,
bat.
you know what? If even if I need the money, I can't show you this because I know you're going to blab it to like you're going to leave whatever the hangar or wherever it is, and you're going to run off. But maybe he had a relationship with Jackie Gleason that he knew him well enough to know. I know you're going to keep this to yourself, whatever it is I show you.
It is
Um,
speculation on my part. But it is a fact that Jackie's golf partner that weekend was Bob Hope, who was even wealthier and a bigger supporter than Jackie of Richard Nixon. And records show that Hope was at the golf tournament that day. He had golfed previously with Nixon. He would go on to defend Nixon all through Watergate. And if there was anyone that you could tap another $1 million from, it would be Bob Hope, and he knew how to keep his mouth shut. And I
mhm.
don't know whether Bob did, but I'm suspicious. Bob went home and designed and had built his own UFO house. You can see it to this day. It started construction in the spring of '73, some months after the encounter with Nixon and Gleason, and possibly Hope could have gone along for the ride. It's called a UFO House of Palm Springs. You can look it up. It's still there. It's this circular house on the edge of a cliff with big bay windows, just like Jackie's was in Chesterfield, Westchester, I beg your pardon, outside New York
Hold on
City.
a minute. This
Yeah.
is incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Wow.
why would Bob Hope suddenly come up with a desire for his own UFO
Hold
house
on a minute.
right after the big Gleason Nixon
Let me
story?
tell you something. The timing on that is just a tad
Yeah.
suspicious.
Just a little suspicious, isn't it? And of all the subjects, Bob Hope and UFOs, I tried to research it and
Let me see
really
if
didn't
I
seem
can
to
show
talk
it
about
here.
it. Yeah. There it is.
Oh,
There's
there it is.
the
That's a
strange looking
weird.
UFO.
That
Yeah.
is an unusual house.
Of
That
all
is
the houses Bob could have helped design and build, why this?
yes, exactly. And this was right after
Right.
that.
I
Uh,
checked the president's records, and in the days before he flew down to Florida for this
mm-hmm.
trip, he called Bob Hope to make sure Bob's going to be there, right? And Bob said, "Yes, I'm going to be at Jackie's golf tournament. I'll be there on the 19th, February 19th." That's the exact anniversary date of another story. Whoops, over this hand of President Eisenhower's February 19th, 1954 encounter at Edwards Air Force Base. And who was Eisenhower's vice president? Richard Nixon.
That's right.
And so, exactly on the same exact day, some people feel, and it's quite possible, that Eisenhower communicated with human like aliens and set forth a kind of treaty that would have been maybe renewed every year or every 10 years or something. So, maybe Nixon had to be at an Air Force base regarding extraterrestrial matters and this treaty, and he invited Jackie along, figured kill two birds with one stone. Now, that's a little speculative on my part, but it makes sense. And Nixon was asked once by a biographer, what about space aliens? And Nixon gave his opinion on everything. For that, he just clammed up and said, he raised his eyebrows, according to the biographer, and didn't want to talk about it. So there's another thing that you could say, well, Nixon had nothing to do with extraterrestrials. That's not proof. But it is also suspicious that Mr. Nixon would talk about any subject and would just raise his eyebrows like that and say nothing. Jackie said nothing to the public, as I've mentioned, but we all know he was obsessed, even as far back as his honeymooners day, when he had a special episode written for him in which he put on a costume that he made around the house for a masquerade party, and he declared, "I am the man from space." You
You know
remember
what?
that
I kind of
episode?
remember that.
Uh-oh. They're going to a costume party, and Jackie takes off knobs from appliances and a metal board, and he puts on this pair of sunglasses, and he pretends.
Here's your
Yeah,
book
yeah.
that
There's
the
the cover of it.
Nixon-Gleason alien encounter. Right. And people, you know what? A lot of people do not know about this. You hear so many stories, Roswell this and all that, and a lot of people are not aware, don't remember about that there was that. Like I said, I only thought Miami people kind of had heard about this.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's a great story, and I researched it as much as possible. I always like to give readers their money's worth and put in as much citation resources and various quotes from actual people and steer clear of crazy conspiracy theories that there were evil aliens and attacks and all this nonsense. And if I have to use speculation, I'll do that. But I pointed out to the reader just logical speculation. But the facts are, as we've seen, Nixon was in town that day, butting up with Jackie Gleason. They were friends. Homestead Air Force Base was just a short chopper ride, and that Nixon's record for that night has been vanished. You're not allowed to
that's
see that.
that
Yeah,
right there.
yeah.
I'm telling you, that's what a coinkydink, huh?
Yeah. His records begin the next morning when he got up, ate breakfast, and flew back to Homestead Air Force Base, boarded Air Force One after a few minutes with his family, and flew north to, I think, South Carolina or something.
Here we
And
go.
Jackie continued his golf tournament. So, yeah, there's the two of them
There's
golfing.
Nixon and
Yeah, that was
Jackie
just a few
Gleason.
days, that photo, before the astronauts landing on the moon in July of 1969. Nixon came down to
Wow.
hobnob with Jackie and they're all excited about the Apollo space mission. And so, again, Jackie was fascinated by space. The astronauts lived not far away at Cape Canaveral and such.
Yeah,
And
right up the
so it
coast.
was just a natural fit. Everyone seemed to come to Miami in those days.
Yeah, well, you remember the BB Rebozo was also
Yeah.
that on Key Biscayne, which is, there were visits. I remember that taking
Oh, yeah. The house
place.
next door, actually. And they buddied
Mm-hmm.
up and went boating and went golfing
Yes.
together, and they were extremely close.
Yes, 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 yes. God, I mean, let me tell you, it's and of course, it's incredible what goes on in the public purview as versus what's actually happening
Yeah.
in
You
the
find out
background.
years later, yeah, don't you, about a lot of stuff. Oh, this was going on. Well, they didn't tell us that then, did they?
Yes. And
One
like
of
I said, and
Jackie,
Homestead, even besides his Homestead Air Force Base, has always had a reputation for weird stuff going on
yeah.
there.
It was flattened in the early 1990s by a hurricane, and it's been rebuilt as something slightly different.
I lived through that hurricane, so I
Oh,
know
really?
about all
Oh,
about.
my
Oh,
goodness.
Andrew,
Really
19
bad. Yeah.
August 23rd of 1992, 22 into 22nd. Yes, 23rd. Yes, it was. It was supposed to come in a little bit north, and it came in right through Homestead. Like it caught people aware but unaware because it came in like I want to say maybe 50 miles south of where they said it was going to go into. And yeah, it everything got
Flattened Homestead like a pancake,
flattened.
really. Yeah, that
Yes.
made the
Yeah.
national news.
Mm-hmm. So yeah.
I don't really believe in curses, but you got to wonder if there was a curse on this because Jackie suffered from poor health for many years, and his career went into a real nosedive until he got that Smokey and the Bandit role, and he passed away from various health issues. His house actually caught fire in Inverary at one point, had to be
Really?
largely rebuilt. Yeah. Nixon's house was, he sold it as soon as his presidency was over and never went back. And it was bulldozed by a wealthy new owner. It's been flattened, it's gone. Homestead Air Force Base, as we knew it then, is gone. A
Yes.
number of people associated with Jackie or Nixon met pretty bad fates. Uh,
Yes.
it's kind of spooky that
You
Nixon
remember what I said
is
earlier that
mired in
sometimes
Watergate.
people sometimes, and I'm not saying, but there's like almost like a slew of people surrounding UFO disclosure that meet weird or unusual
Yes.
or untimely demises that you could say, well, it's a, could be a coincidence, but after a while, yeah. Or in this case, like what you said, a curse. But
There was a story from some NASA scientists, and this made the news in some cases. They started showing up mysteriously dead, suicided, victim of a robbery murder. They found one of the scientists' body stuffed in a tree. And there was like up to 15 or so scientists who just happened to be associated with this one top secret program who ended up dead. And I'm thinking, you don't want to work for NASA, do you?
that's talk about a Deadpool. Wow.
Apparently you're expendable. I know sometimes there are natural deaths in life, like some
Sure,
of
you're
us,
right.
but
Yeah.
when they start mounting up into the like over a dozen, it starts to get awfully suspicious. And a number of UFO researchers have met some untimely fates, but again, natural or something caused by people who don't want you to talk. I've
Right, or
never,
people that are not suicidal all of a sudden
yeah,
commit suicide. That kind of like, what? He did what?
yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yes.
Yeah, so it's a little scary. I don't think Jackie was bothered by anyone, but I'm sure he was a little rattled when his wife wrote this story in
She must have
1983.
been like, I'm gonna, what was it? To the
Yeah.
moon. I'm gonna kill her.
Beverly wanted to write her own tell all book, and she wanted to start things out with this one-page article. Jackie called her up the second time this happened, chewed her out, said, I told you not to talk about this. You're not to say anything. And she clammed up for nearly for the rest of her life. She gave one more interview in the year 2000 and stuck to her story, didn't change a thing, said, Jackie told me this. I believed him. And she said that Jackie had met not too long before, I believe, the 73 incident with a U.S. astronaut. She didn't name specifically who it was, but she said he was one of the original pioneers in space. And I'm thinking
Mhm.
it's probably Gordon Cooper, who was invited to Jackie's golf tournament that day. He was president or present with Nixon and Gleason and Bob Hope. They were all together. Well,
Wow.
anyway, Jackie had been told by a NASA astronaut that there are aliens visiting, that the astronaut had seen them on occasion and in a space mission. And that sent Jackie into a bit of a tizzy because he was all excited by that story and realizing that, you know, after what he was shown in person, it wasn't a joke. Nixon wasn't a hoaxer. He wasn't a joker type person who set some dummies out or something like that, that this was
Right.
the real deal, that he'd finally gotten his answers he craved for like 20 years.
Right. And God knows maybe what he was shown because that's
Yeah.
yeah, you always think of I'm thinking of prior to this, and of course everybody says that all these sci-fi movies that were produced about alien invasion was because of the Cold War, and you either had human-like or stuff like War of the Worlds. But God knows what he saw that really like it was like I knew I thought they existed, but God, you
Yeah,
know,
he said that Nixon had an armed escort. They were super serious soldiers with weapons, drove them across the base to the secluded laboratory where there was a guard guarding the door, you know, top secret stuff. And that inside were four examining tables with four bodies stretched out, apparently identical. And again, pointy eared, big eyes, creepy little dwarfish aliens,
right,
and that he did not describe seeing any injuries, any wounds, which, if they were there, the wife did not recall this. And so you kind of wondered, well, what happened to these creatures? She said, Jackie said, there must have been a crash nearby for these bodies to be here. But that's kind of specious reasoning. Nixon could have ordered them from any lab or air base in the country, fly these in and stick these in this laboratory because I'm the commander in chief and I say so. I want my friend to see this. And so it doesn't have to have been from a nearby crash.
but then who knows?
Yeah, you know,
Can you
or
imagine?
anything that's coming down out of the sky at night for Homestead, which is, as you have said, rumored to have had some strange things going on
Yes.
around there. It's bordered nearly by the Atlantic Ocean, so
Mhm.
it's high security, like the Army, Navy, Air Force. They've all got operatives and offices on that base. They're keeping an eye on Castro's Cuba,
Yeah.
communist
This
Cuba.
is before I moved up here. I mean, I grew up in Miami, but right before I lived in Homestead, so I'm very familiar.
Oh,
We
okay.
got
Wow.
Homestead. Basically, Homestead is right down. You go down, and that's it. You're going into the Keys, into the Florida Keys.
Yeah.
You zip down there, and then you're hitting all these bridges going through the Keys. But exactly, it's the bay is right there. The as far as the Atlantic Ocean and
Some
everything.
farmland.
Yes, and it's yeah, it's right there. It's basically, for lack of a better word, it's the southernmost point of Florida Keys. They say is 90 miles to Cuba, and then
Yeah.
this is a little bit further. But I'm saying as far as and down in Key West, they do have a base, a Navy base, but not like Homestead Air Force Base.
It must have
And
felt like the end of the world. You're at the tip of the peninsula down there.
yes, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
But
it's
but
somewhat
what I'm saying, as far
isolated.
as bases, this Homestead Air Force Base it was a huge base. Even after when they kind of shut down a base, but they always kept it open. It was really weird because the city of Homestead basically circulated around this base while it
Yeah.
was open.
There's a military, not functioning, but for, you know, a bar to appeal to the men on the base to come walk over and some shops and such, but probably not a whole
Right.
lot going
But
on.
once the base decided to leave, which really in reality, it kind of like hurt the businesses and because, they had personnel even living out in the community. I'm telling you, the base was a big boon to the economy, but even after they supposedly left, they were always still there.
Yeah.
And so,
For Air Force One to land there, you know, it had to have been a good sized, top security, a lot of personnel guarding the
yes,
place. And so you didn't
yes.
want to mess around with that. That's probably not some place you want to just think, I'll just go walking in and take a look around. They would have
Oh, no, no. You
been
could
pretty
you could
quick. Yeah.
walk around, but they were always the main entrance. It was guarded, they
Yeah.
had sentries to go in
Patrolled,
there.
fencing. Yeah.
And I'll tell you this much. They had very close to it. There was, I don't know if you ever heard of Job Corps, which is, where they help, when kids that they need help, that they're, problematic kids, they send them over to Job Corps so that they could get training, like trade school kind of stuff. There was and it's a government installation, was right next to um, Homestead Air Force Base. And this was a few years ago. And one time I was out there doing an interview because there had been a murder thing. But let me tell you something. It was incredible how they were guarding this Job Corps thing, which had nothing to do with you would think with the military.
Yeah,
It was,
guarding the vocational center.
yeah. It was like, what is this? What is this?
Yeah. Why would you
They
have to guard that?
Exactly. If all we're talking about is, this is a place where they were sending kids, that weren't doing well, behavior problems, and this is basically where they would train them and give them some type of apprenticeship. Job Corps, they have them all over the United States, that program. But yes, and this was only a few years ago. Weird stuff is still going on there, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Did you know a alleged psychic named KT Frankovic? Ever
KT.
heard of her?
No.
She claimed that she lived for a few years in Homestead and
Mm-hmm.
would go outside and exercise and everything. And
Okay.
she claimed that she was south of or outside the base. I'll just say that. I don't remember what direction.
Okay.
And was walking through an orchard because there's a lot of, orange trees and such. She said, not far from the base, she encountered an extraterrestrial creature. Like somebody came down in the wrong area, and landed and hit the farm instead of the air base runway or something like that. And she turned around and got her tail out of there fast. But I thought that was an interesting story that other people have cited UFOs over the years, mostly at night. And then, of course, off the coast is the part of the so called Bermuda Triangle,
Yes, of
which,
course.
yeah, and there's some strange stories there that I don't know what to think. Even Geraldo Rivera said that he took a sailboat through the Bermuda Triangle
Yes,
and
he did.
encountered this spacecraft overhead, a circular
Yes,
disc.
I saw
He
that. I
was
saw
serious,
that.
yeah. And
He was a
so,
young guy. He was
yeah,
still unknown. He
yeah.
wasn't that well. He wasn't the Geraldo Rivera. Everybody. Let me explain a little bit about Homestead, what she's describing. Homestead, there's a main highway which is called South Dixie. It was South Dixie Highway. This was a very old highway that would take you, as a matter of fact, into the Keys. It was been around. Homestead Air Force Base was on the east side of this, very close to the bay, to the water. West of this was a big swath of agricultural area, but like what she's describing. This was one of the big, big belts in South Florida, even back 100 years ago. All right. So, and talk about lonely, middle of nowhere. Yes. So if she was out there, how can I tell you that dividing line, that US one, that South Dixie Highway was, if she was by there, I could see, I think I know where she's talking about, depending also on what year it was. But there was a lot of agriculture out there. West,
I, I put this source in my book who said, and I don't know how he knew this unless he was there, Nixon really did show Jackie Gleason the bodies and this spacecraft in a hangar. And he said, you can see that hangar from the highway as you drive it by the base. It's so big and the highway's so close nearby.
right.
And
And then this is the thing, you know what? When you drive by this base, you see a bunch of buildings, but you really don't know. They're
no,
very nondescript. How's that?
yeah, I'm sure the airplane hangar from Jackie's day was flattened by the hurricane in the 1990s. So they had to rebuild them and repurpose that air
Mm-hmm.
base, and it's still functioning. I'm proud of those people, those personnel who serve our
Yes.
country down there. It's great.
Yes.
But I think
Yes.
a terrific story happened 51 years ago. And I'm glad to get it into book form. I think people will find this really
I think
fascinating,
it's
whether you
so
live in Florida or
interesting. I
not.
feel like going back now and going to, because I grew up there, but again, um, and there was one time also a sighting of that. I mean, there was different sightings, but there was one at the Miami airport also, not uh, of UFOs, that was supposedly seen by the personnel in the tower, the air controllers. So, and of course, like you said, the Bermuda Triangle, that always has that
Yeah.
Besides the thing of the ships disappearing, there's also a lot of sightings of
Yeah,
UFOs.
discs and craft, mostly at
Yes.
night, but not entirely. Were you in Homestead in the early 70s at the time of the incident?
I lived in Miami. Okay,
Oh,
this
okay.
is my but I could drive into Homestead all the time. I drove into Homestead all the time. This was all part of the county. It's Miami-Dade County or Dade County back then, and it was Miami, and Homestead was, like I said, further south. And if you went into Homestead, it was like I said, it was just a lot of farms. Basically, it was farmland, a lot
Yeah,
of the landscape nursery people, fruit trees. This was like the agricultural belt
yeah. A lot of
of
farmland
Miami-Dade
from the
County.
yeah, from the photographs I've seen, a lot of farmland, and that helped kind of
Yes.
make the base more remote to keep people from just wandering over there and trying to peek in, private
Well,
property,
you
farmland.
know what? I'm going to tell you, honestly, back then, also people, I'm gonna, were either had more respect or were scared that they would not go on a
One of the
base.
two, yeah.
Yeah, nobody was about to try to get into any type of military base because
Yeah,
it was understood something bad's gonna happen to you. You're gonna get
yeah.
shot if you're in there without permission or doing something. It's not like the paparazzi nowadays that you see them trying to get into stuff. You know, unless you
Uh,
were like a um a journalist with credentials and you were allowed, nobody, I don't think, was gonna try anything like that.
can I ask you if you remember specifically when and where you first heard the Nixon-Gleason rumor that went around?
Oh my God.
Is that
God,
escaped you?
I want to say maybe man, I want to say in the late 70s, early 80s, around that time period was after, like, this wasn't something that hit the news like right away. You know how something disperses
Yeah,
through the
it takes a
public and
while. Yeah,
it takes
especially
years.
yeah, especially when Nixon was out of office and all of his
Right.
underlings, some of them went to jail, and
Hmm.
others never found employment again in government. So that people may have felt more free to start talking about this and other secrets that started to leak out. So Nixon had a lot of secrets, as we found out as the
Well, you know
stories
what? And I think that's part of it. I think that what happened later on with Watergate, kind of like forget the UFO thing with Jackie Gleason. When you look at it, like the more serious, with Nixon versus, oh, that he told an entertainer about UFOs at Homestead Air Force. In
Yeah,
other words, Nixon's notoriety eclipsed that story altogether back then, is what I'm saying.
and until Steven Spielberg movies came along in the late 70s and early 80s,
Yes.
still UFOs and aliens weren't quite as mainstream as they are today in TVs and movies and graphic novels and serialized in all kinds of form. And there's far more believers and people who are waking up that, we are being visited. We are not alone in the cosmos. And this Jackie Gleason alien witness story is just one little piece of the puzzle. I've seen so many stories now, and stories from cosmologists and scientists, very highly trained, educated people, saying we can speculate pretty clearly now that there are other planet Earths in the cosmos, maybe even on our Milky Way galaxy, and on those planets, human type beings are growing and evolving as we have. So some could be further advanced, some could be less advanced. There could be all kinds of life forms, could be billions of them in the cosmos, and some of them have advanced a space program that could come here through wormholes or
Right. In other
travel
words, it's not
interdimensionally.
like
Yeah,
what people think of as in linear. You know how you think of
yeah,
people say,
right.
oh,
Yeah,
light years,
yeah,
that if they're traveling inter or intradimensionally versus
yeah.
that's what how they do it, in other words.
It could
Yeah,
it be a matter of seconds through their technology to
exactly.
access our atmosphere and our planet, and not, like put up a big spacecraft with beds and we're going to go to sleep for 20 years as
Right,
it
yes,
takes us there.
exactly.
Yeah, that's our crude advancement, and
Right.
we're
Well,
getting better.
you
But
remember when the Planet of the Apes, the original one, came out with Charlton Heston, that was the
sure,
whole premise that they had gone to sleep in order to travel.
yeah, and then they came back and
That
gorillas.
no, that ending, forget it. That's the one of the best endings for a movie that I had seen in quite a
Yeah,
while.
you
The
blew it up.
Yeah, you damn you, whatever, it's Charlton Heston, of course, does it much
That
better.
was huge back in the day. That was
Yes,
a great breakthrough in science fiction movies. So there was
yes.
something. It wasn't about really aliens or spacecraft, but it was something that got people's minds thinking about, going out into space and what we will encounter. And Nixon
Mhm.
was a big fan of the space program and backed it for a long time. Then we kind of ran out of money and found through all of our missions to the moon, as we see on the screen here, there wasn't a whole lot there besides rocks and dust and
So I'm
craters.
gonna ask you, Paul, I'm gonna
Yeah.
ask you, do you think we went to the moon?
I believe so. There's just too
Okay.
many people, astronauts, respectable scientists, NASA
Let
engineers
me
that
tell you
say
something.
that.
I remember, it was never any doubt, like, of course we went to the moon. And then now lately you hear all these things that we never went, that it was all like, and I was like, God, what? Now, however, I will one thing. Why didn't we go back? Once we took the trouble to get
Yeah.
there, why didn't we go back?
There's just nothing much we could do. Now, today, they're talking about going back to establish maybe a colony or
Mhm.
a base that you could land things on. What is most exciting to me is talking about not only going to Mars, but changing the atmosphere, planting grass seed, putting out lots of pasture, and putting in animals and start farming Mars and then having our own colonies and beginning an Earth like property. It's staggering to think about, but
It's like
the
terraforming the
yeah,
planet.
there's the word I'm looking for. And so
Mhm.
it could be a real reality decades from now. The idea of going to Mars, it's still a bit of a long trip, but
Well, you know what? I would even think of, which is, the in other words, go to from the moon, and then from the moon, you
yeah,
then from there you
right.
like in
Let's
other
start
words,
with the moon. And let's
right.
terraform the moon first and then use that as a launching pad, escaping Earth's gravity. And the Chinese and the Russians and
Now everybody's landing on the
India,
moon,
yeah,
even
they're
though they're
all aiming to go to the
unmanned.
moon. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's a shame we landed a craft recently and it tipped over.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
it's
but
still
everybody has the same problem. Who was it? Was it the Russians or the Japanese also had a problem landing there because basically it's unmanned. They're doing it remotely.
right.
So, and I guess, you know, even though it doesn't look like it, if you don't land in the right place or if there's a crater or, or something like that. And also, I think that they also ran into a problem. I think it was the Japanese, where some of their, I guess, mechanics is solar powered. And basically, once the moon goes dark, they didn't have any power on
Oh,
what they had landed. So
yeah.
basically, they had to wait. And I was like, solar power? Are you kidding me? But I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, but there's a lot of, again, I'm thinking, yeah, they should have kept going, and by now they would have figured stuff like that out, you
As
know?
Jackie would say, bam, zoom to the moon, Alice. He
Yes,
was
God, I
obsessed as
remember
anyone
that.
else with the moon. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
The
God.
honeymooners.
And he was, like you said, and of course, let me tell you something. I remember him so well in that movie of The Smokey and the Bandit, because let's face it, yeah, Burt Reynolds, but really,
Yeah.
he kind of like stole the show in a way.
Yeah, Jackie stole the movie. He
Yeah,
was easily the most over the top funny guy. You laughed at
yeah,
his lines. He may have played the villain, but he
yes,
was so
exactly.
brilliant at it. He was a New Yorker. He's playing this Southern sheriff with an
Yes,
accent, and Burt Reynolds' father
yes.
was a South Florida police officer. And Jackie listened to all of Burt's stories about what his dad said and what he did, and he applied that to this character. And you really start to believe during the movie Jackie's a small town sheriff in like Arkansas. What's this county mountie doing here in Texas or Alabama or Georgia? He's not giving up. That's how
Right.
talented Jackie was. He was amazing. He could do anything.
Right, because the whole movie was,
Yeah.
well,
He's
obviously anybody that's watched it, but
yeah.
yeah, it was, and it's like everything else,
Yeah, he was. They called him the Great One because he could sing
yes,
and dance and compose music, and he did the choreography on his show. And he told stand-up jokes. He did mime. He did sketches. He was like a magician. He could just pull comedy out like that. Burt Reynolds says he had us on the floor while filming Smokey and the Bandit, that Jackie would do all these characters and tell funny stories. And Burt said we were on the floor laughing. Our sides hurt. And he was an older man by that time, Jackie
right.
Gleason.
Didn't Trixie, the actress that played Trixie, she died, I think,
Just
like,
passed away like a month ago or so. She was
yeah,
living
yeah,
like
she was,
97 or so.
yeah,
Yeah,
she was, yeah,
way up
every,
there.
because
So
everybody, the
they're
whole
all
cast
passed
was also
away
very
now.
talented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they all said that Jackie was mostly a generous, kind man. He did have a temper, You didn't want to cross him when he lost his temper, like with the writers or producers or something. And he hated to rehearse. And I found out why.
Why?
Jackie had a photographic memory. He could look at a script and it was lodged up here like a visual, and he didn't
Hmm.
need to rehearse. He liked the spontaneity
And
of
it's
what
like,
he
why can't
remembered.
you do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure.
So the other cast members would rehearse, and there'd be a stand-in for Jackie, and he'd just show up on taping day and tape the show. And sometimes he might have forgotten a little of it, but amazingly, they ran through everything, and he knew what to do. And the shows went just great, and they're classics to this day.
Yes, they are.
So
They
I'm
are.
thinking that when he saw this alien body, or four of them in this lab, he kept that visual in his head for the rest of his life. He never forgot it because of his photographic memory, and it shook him up so bad.
Let
So
me ask
we
you
can,
something. You think about it that if you're a person, whether you're Jackie Gleason or anybody, and you've learned this information through, of course, a connection, but you're sworn to secrecy
yeah, you
and
got
you
to be
can't betray
personally
that
tell
person.
somebody.
How do you, but then at the same time, you realize, my God, this is monumental as
Yeah,
far as,
I
I
gotta
mean,
tell somebody.
I
You
gotta
did
tell,
tell
or
somebody.
why, can I take this to the grave and, and I guess where I'm going with this is he didn't even make a deathbed confession. You hear about people that at the last minute they spill the beans. They say, "Look," because they know they're not long for this world.
Yeah, and the day before he died, on his deathbed in Louder Hill, in his Inverary home, still the same house, he had his will changed and left more money to his daughter and to his female secretary. Could Jackie have dictated a statement then that was buried? We don't
Oh my
know.
God!
Yeah.
Oh,
Could they have said, well, we'll just hold on to this for like 50 years and release it? I find that very possible. It hasn't been leaked yet. So
right.
it was such a momentous event in his life.
Uh,
I got to believe he might have said to the stenographer writing this down, I got something else I want to tell you, but we haven't seen it yet.
hey, okay, let's go down the rabbit hole. They plant whatever this agency is, plants a nurse or somebody in there and says, "You listen, if you see Jackie, start talking about that."
Yeah.
Or somebody, or maybe they
Pull the
did,
plug.
and somebody shows up, one of those men in blacks, and goes, "Yeah, give me that piece of paper."
Yeah, really. That's another factor. Like, yeah, I guess so. If you knew he was near death, as many people did, I remember my father at the time showed me a National Enquirer article, Jackie Gleason bad off with cancer near death. And I said, oh, Dad, you can't believe the Enquirer. The Enquirer was dead on. Jackie did die shortly after that article came out. It was the truth. And people around him knew he was dying. He was in physically frail health. He went to the hospital for a while and he said, I want to die in my own bed.
Yes.
So they got him into an ambulance and took him home, and he died in his own bed. And one of the very few phone calls he took was from Alice, Audrey Meadows, who
Mhm.
called and spoke to him and said, Ralph, this is Alice. And he perked right up on his deathbed and
Aw.
spoke to her. Isn't that beautiful? And then he
Yeah,
died
that
shortly
is.
thereafter. Yeah.
Yeah, but then again, let me tell you something, talk about the big question mark, like, and maybe he thought, you know what, forget it. I'm gonna die, they
Yeah.
can figure it out later on.
I'd like to think he said, okay, what's the worst you can do to me? I'm
Right,
dying
that's
anyway.
why I said
Yeah.
that. You
Yeah.
hear about all these people, that for different reasons, either because they're saying that, okay, what are they gonna do to me? I'm gonna die. I'm
Yeah.
gonna say what I saw.
Yeah, a
And
few people have come forward like that. I think Philip Corso was another who was in the
mhm.
military, high ranking, and he made a whole book and the day after Roswell and said this happened. I'm like 96 or something when he passed away. It came out shortly before he died. And what's the worst you're going to do? You're going to die anyway.
Exactly, right. You can't ruin my career. You can't cut off my pension because I'm not gonna need it.
Yeah.
Um, it's like, what are
Maybe
you gonna
there's a threat that would be out there. Oh, your family, your relatives. You don't
That's
want
the
anything
only
to
one that sometimes it
yeah.
makes me think
Might have a
that,
little accident if when you're
well,
gone.
think about it. And I've always, you always hear, like you said, ex-military and people that later on they talk about what they saw, and I think, you know what, I imagine there's got to be other personnel that say, you know what, even if I'm gone, what if they start wondering what I told my family, or if I told my family, am I going to put them under the microscope for some reason? Because if I talked about it, then God knows you spoke to your wife, your kids. What did you tell him? And of course, I'm thinking somebody that really knew a lot of stuff, really important stuff. And I imagine there's people there that said, you know what, I know some things, but I'm not going to talk because I'm not going to put them, under the microscope, from whatever the agency is that goes, you what? You're doing what?
Yeah.
Now we got to eavesdrop on everybody's, all your family's conversations just to find out, you
Uh,
know, what you might
George
have talked
Knapp
about.
is a UFO reporter and an author.
Yes.
He was an investigative newsman, and he got a lot of stories about what's going on at Area 51 and aliens and stuff. And he said that the witnesses he talked to are more scared of the American government than of any
Yes.
aliens coming down. That's
Yes.
how bad it can be.
Yes. Mac Brazel, the guy
Yeah, the
out in
farmer, the
Roswell,
rancher. Yeah.
they said his family and people that first of all he said that he very rarely would he was very short and abrupt. He never wanted to talk about, but that throughout the years before he died, he said that the biggest mistake he had ever made was coming forward
Oh,
and talking about what he had
yeah.
seen, what he discovered out there.
They made
Okay.
him very afraid.
Yes. In other words, it was like, why did that another from what I understand, he thought he was doing the right thing, or he was just to him it didn't seem like such a big deal. Then and that afterwards and later on in life, he kind of like described it as why couldn't I have just not done it? Like it affected his life profoundly. And I think it had to do with what you're describing that, that maybe he was either threatened or told, hey, you better not say anything else or just, whatever.
Nowadays, there are some more whistleblowers like David Grush and apparently some
Yes.
others. Congress is taking this seriously, looking into it. Apparently, I think someone like South Florida's Marco Rubio said we've got a little flood of people who have come in to tell us to testify or give their story in privacy that we are being visited. The American government has the proof, kind of like what Jackie said he
But
saw.
let me ask you, do you think that it's weird though that after so many decades of basically discrediting anybody that would come forward,
Yeah,
now all of a sudden they're like doing congressional hearings and I'm like, huh? You're
yeah.
what?
If it all comes out,
I don't
then
know.
what does this say about our representatives in Washington, including U.S. presidents, for many years who have either belittled the subject,
Yeah.
tamped it down, or just were in complete denial that was part of the program, and now they're going to come back and say, "Oh, we were lying." What do you know? And a classic example is Area 51 itself in Nevada. The government denied for decades it even existed. And then in
Right.
the mid 90s, there was a court trial and things got down to the nitty gritty. And eventually they admitted it's real. And yes, it's an air base and it's called Area 51. We've been lying all this time. So there's an
What do you
example.
exactly?
Yeah.
And and this is the thing. And then what's everybody? I think that um I don't know. I still like I'm a little bit suspicious of the motives. Call me cynical if you want, but I don't know. Because so many people, I'm gonna give a short story. My husband was a Port Authority police officer up in New York, New Jersey area. And one time he started working like the overnight shift and he said he saw some strange lights out in the out in the landing strip somewhere, something. And he went and he spoke to a supervisor. And the supervisor, he said the guy at one point used to work for TWA, not longer in existence, pulls him into his office, closes the door, tells him, Henry, don't ever talk about that again. Do you understand me?
Yeah.
Shut up. And he goes, yes, my husband was like kind of wigged out because he says, when you work out in the airport, even though he worked, you know what plane lights look like, you know, and it
These
was a
weren't
win,
an airplane.
right, you know, and he said it was a winter night and it was a lot of snow. And he says, I knew what airplanes looked like landing or taking off and things like that. And the guy said, look, and he goes, well, then do me a favor. Put me back on daytime. Get me back on day shift. I don't want to be out here anymore. I don't, like in other words, I don't want to see anything else. And sure the guy goes, no problem, don't worry about it. But he says the guy took him, he's like in other words, don't tell me because I don't want to know what you're gonna tell me because, in other words, once you have that information, you then becomes this, I don't want to know, I don't want to hear it, and I'm going to give you advice. Shut
Yeah,
up. Don't talk
there's
about that ever
so
again.
much fear in people, especially if you have a government contract or a government
Hmm.
job directly. Hopefully, many of these confessions or these whistleblower stories will come out, they'll be released, and we'll get more to the bottom of this, congressionally or not. And we'll see more and more why the government has kept the lid on, what we're kind of facing, and what we can expect. There's a CIA agent named Ramirez, I think his name is, who claims that in the year 2027, we're going to be kind of forced into more revelations. A bigger thing is coming, and the government kind of wants to hold on and keep the lid clamped down until then, like 3 more years. So who knows what's going to happen? I don't know.
I don't know. You know what? When people say that, but they don't give the reason why. Okay, they're
Yeah.
going to because dot dot
Yeah.
dot.
Yeah. What's coming?
Yeah, like, it's like, oh, it's like that. But that, But again, anyway, it has been wonderful to speak to you, Paul. I want to thank you so much. And for my podcast listeners, what's your website or where they can find you and your work?
I got a really crummy website. I'm almost embarrassed. I need to work on it. It's called mo41.info. But you can get my books from amazon.com. And I look forward to writing some more. I might have a book on Ronald Reagan. I certainly got the Eisenhower Nixon book. And I
Okay.
hope to get my Cape Girardeau book back up and with a new publisher. So look for me there.
Let me
Oh,
tell you
also,
something. Yes, go
one
ahead.
more thing. I've also got my Eisenhower and Nixon books on audio, cassette audio by Tantor.com. I sometimes forget to help promote that. If you want
Yes.
to listen, it's well read by Tom Bayer, and you can get those at either Amazon or Tantor.com directly.
Yes, let me tell you something. I've always been a big reader, and it took me a while to get onto Audible to listen to books, but it helps a lot because basically you can do things while you're listening, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Do the dishes,
Yeah,
even
there's a
go
lot of
drive,
stuff that you can do.
do your
Exactly,
errands. Yeah.
exactly. So I know
So,
exactly what you mean.
yeah.
Again, Paul, thank you so much. It's been wonderful. I mean, you said you're working on another book or you haven't started it or you're gonna.
I've got a lot of data on Ronald Reagan, but I think some of it's kind of redundant that people have heard this or read this before. I'm looking for something
Hmm.
a little more fresh, but I could make it a trilogy of Republican presidents, I guess, from
Yeah.
Eisenhower to Nixon to Reagan, and that would be kind of cool. So we'll see if I can get my act together. If you out there have any information on President Reagan and aliens,
I'm gonna put
contact
a
me
link
on
to
the
your
internet.
website anyway on the credits of the show for
All right.
anybody that they'll
Yeah,
find you.
yeah.
So look him up and
Yeah. Don't
like
expect
if
much, but
if there's
yeah,
anybody there that you're ready to spill the beans, he's the one
yeah.
to.
I get occasionally tips or information on the Cape Girardeau UFO story of 1941, and I
Hmm.
have that on Facebook pages. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and
Okay.
Tribal. So there's all kinds of. If you just look up my name,
Yes.
that I'll be there. And I'm interested in any true stories, not a lot of wild conjecture or craziness.
Right, right. Yeah, in other words, give me something that, you know,
Yeah,
I know exactly what you mean. Like, yeah, you just read that somewhere, didn't you? It's like
yeah,
what you're
yeah.
telling me.
There's a problem with that sometimes. But I
Absolutely.
thank you for having me on the show. It
No,
was a
on
lot
the
of fun.
contrary.
Yeah, it's a great story. I hope the people who enjoy your show enjoy my book.
Absolutely. Take care and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Wow. You know what? I had heard that. I had heard that about Nixon and Jackie Gleason. This was a while back. Uh, a while back. But it's one of those things that kind of floats out there, and to be honest with you, I want to say he's one of the first persons that I've seen that's really done a thorough dig into what was happening. What he said, that thing about Bob Hope and Bob Hope building that house, and so many things that I guess to be maybe the only way that you can really see the coincidence, well, not coincidences, I guess is what it is, like hindsight, like that now that the years have passed and people can look back and do the research and say, hey, look at that. And look who was there. And look what Bob Hope did after he, you know, did Jackie Gleason tell Bob, hey, there's something there. I can't tell you exactly, but they do exist. And Bob Hope said, yeah, well, I'm going to build a house that looks like a spaceship kind of thing. Yeah. How much, but then ultimately you think all these people that were, whether politicians or stars or wherever, the ones that actually got the information from a credible source, that let's say that there was extraterrestrial life, nobody's ever really definitely said yes on their way out. Hey, I saw this and this is it's almost like that towards the end and I don't know if it was fear of repercussions, like you said, or they were told, hey, you got to be patriotic. You can't, what we're discussing, even though you think that the American people need to know this, don't, because it's going to harm us security wise, military wise. And their patriotism didn't allow them. Like, what was it that stopped people that had, through a connection, had actually seen or witnessed, like, hey, this is not like let's say this scenario he had with Jackie Gleason. This wasn't somebody telling them. This is something that they saw. Or even if the person saw, somebody told them, it was like somebody that they absolutely 100% trusted and they believed because they had access. Like, I know that this person, if they told me this and they saw this, it wasn't like 3 or 4 people down. Like, yeah, the guy that knows the guy that knows the guy saw this thing in the hangar. No, no. Makes you wonder why these people, at the end of the day, once they're getting towards, I know some people die unexpectedly, but a lot of these think they're getting older and they're getting on in years, and let's face it, um, the thing about the UFOs and things have become little by little more mainstream. Think of X Files in the '90s and all this other stuff. Well, I didn't say. By the way, guess what? I went and I saw this and blah 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 blah. Because let's face it, if Joe Schmo over here, who's an average, like a normie, a regular person, says, "Hey, I saw a UFO," or "I was abducted," or "I saw alien bodies," everybody's like, okay, yeah, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But once you start getting somebody, either a politician or even a celebrity, because let's face it, sometimes we give a lot of credit to celebrities like that. But anyway, that the celebrity at the end of the day has some type of audience, has some type of reach. Okay, that none of them have come forward and said, hey, by the way, I'm going to tell you all what I saw maybe 20 years ago. I went here and I saw this and I saw that, and I've held my peace because I promised or whatever. But you know what? I think I'm a goner like within the next few months. So this is what it is. Nobody's done that. Like, definitively. Somebody that you could say, again, what is it? Fear? Patriotism? Um, or then you think about it. What if the ones that they say, be careful, the ones that come to get you, it's not going to be the men in black, it's the aliens themselves. That'll really put, that talk about playing with. And again, I'm fascinated by what he said, that Jackie Gleason comes back from this trip. Be quiet, you guys. And is wigged out. He's wigged out. He saw what he's been wanting to see, that you would think, wow, he saw it. You've been asking. Here it is. But he's so shook up. Because I'm thinking, if you believe in this already and you, let's face it, you imagine it. In other words, my imagination's taken you from they look like humans to they look weird. But already you've already rehearsed in your mind that moment when you might have that confirmation of extraterrestrial life. But then you actually see and you come back so shook up. That tells me this was something that you never imagined. You never went in that direction. That you're so totally like like what he described. And that's, I think, is the most unusual, what's the word I'm looking for? The most unusual thing of that whole scenario where he goes off with Nixon and he comes back and, his wife probably thought he's gonna pass out, he's gonna die, something's wrong. All right. Um, maybe it was a live one. But I'm thinking again, okay, they take you and they show you some corpses of dead ETs. That's pretty astounding. But let's face it, I'm sure that up to a certain point, mm, it's like, okay, but what if they had a live one? And all of a sudden, this is or maybe he's being told, yeah, we have a live one, and yeah, we have their spaceship, but the truth is, we have no idea how to run this thing. These people, these species, whatever they are, technologically, they outstrip us. They could run circles around us when it comes to technology, and we're just playing catch up. And the truth is, we got to be really careful because we don't understand their technology, how it works. Like, in other words, if we had to defend ourselves from them, this is just me making things up, but why not? We would we'd be on the short end of the stick. In other words, we have no, what's the word I'm thinking of? How can you, if we ever had to, for anybody that's seen the War of the Worlds, that's kind of the theme of that movie. That technology wise, the aliens are superior to us. They have an invasion plan, and that's it. They're decimating humans from the earth, and basically, what saves our butts is germ warfare, unintentionally, but that's how it works out. Same thing. We could, we there's no way to make war against these aliens because first of all, we might not even be able to see them. Besides the technology part, besides the technology part, you know. So in other words, yeah, we got to play nice with them, and we could never just, hey, which think about it. If you've got a superior civilization saying, I want this or I want that, and you're gonna have to say, yeah, sure, okay. You don't like it, too bad. Oh, by the way, we're gonna be picking up some of your humans running around, some of your population. We need to experiment on them. Just make sure and hush it down. Don't say anything. What are you gonna do? Okay, sure. Because everybody always thinks of the idea of that there's a treaty or that we've basically the government has said sure, like in other words, a bargaining, like a bargain thing. If a species or civilization or a culture, whatever you want to call them, is so superior to you, there is no bargaining. You're gonna bargain with what? They're telling you what they're gonna do, and you're just like, okay, sure. Yeah, and by the way, we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that, and we're gonna. By the way, we might also use some of your genetic materials because we want to develop a hybrid that can acclimate better to this earth. Just that's if you get told. Like, but what is the government gonna say? Yeah, we had to go along with it. Oh wow, why did you do that? Why did you allow the humans to be? Well, we couldn't do anything about it. What do you mean? No, there was nothing. We couldn't say no. We could say no, and then what? Get obliterated or whatever? There's no position of power. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe that's why Jackie Gleason was also so disturbed in a way when he came back, was because all of a sudden he realized, yeah, there's extraterrestrials, they're visiting, and we are not king of the hill, not king of the mountain. We're not even king of anything. They're running the show, and we're just there going, yes, okay, yes, anything you want, yeah, sure, okay, we're gonna do, okay, okay, sure, and that's just me. Anything, anyway, everything is open to interpretation until what do they say, until the mothership lands on the lawn of the White House or something like that, or on a main highway, I-95 or something, where it's like impossible to overlook. Until then, I guess it's open to any theory. So anyway, guys, please sign up for my newsletter at mppellicer.com, miamighostchronicles.com, Substack. I've got a lot of interesting stuff on there, plus a lot of interesting guests coming up. So please come back every week. And I do appreciate when you spend the time here with me. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Till next time, take care.